Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Podcast 360, your go-to resource for medical education and clinical updates. I'm your moderator, Jessica Bard, with Consultant 360, a multidisciplinary medical information network. According to the National Institute on Aging, Black Americans are 35% less likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias compared with white Americans, despite national statistics that indicate people who are Black are twice as likely to develop dementias compared with people who are white. Black Americans also have higher rates of potential risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, including hypertension and diabetes. Dr. Sri Banerjee is here to speak with us today about his research titled Among African Americans, Diabetes Modifies the Effect of Alzheimer's Disease, Related Dementia, Mortality.
I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Walden University. I have almost 20 years of experience in public health.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us on the podcast today. We're talking about Alzheimer's disease. What is the burden of Alzheimer's disease in the U.S.?
That's a great question, Jessica. As it turns out, 1 in 8 older Americans, 65 years and older, are affected by Alzheimer's disease related dementia at an annual cost of more than $200 billion. With the future population increasing in the older age groups, estimates indicate that 13.5 million individuals in the US will have Alzheimer's disease by the year 2050. Although race-based norms are helpful for increasing diagnostic accuracy in clinical settings, this makes a number of assumptions about biological constructs of race that might lead to erroneous and potentially harmful interpretations of underlying racial differences.
We're talking about your study here. Please provide us with an overview of your study. Among African Americans, diabetes modifies the effect of Alzheimer's disease-related dementia mortality.
So what I was looking for here is to understand, compared to white Americans, how Black Americans longitudinally leads to Alzheimer's disease-related mortality. And then I was trying to observe is if diabetes actually enhances the effect of ethnicity in determining Alzheimer's disease-related mortality. The findings speak for themselves.
Right, and we'll get into those findings. But before we do, what were the objectives of this study?
That's a great question. Understanding the pathophysiology, that was one area that needed to be explored, and then applying some of these findings in the context of racial disparities, and then some of the conclusions that arise from these.
And we'll also get into some of those racial disparities. So can you tell us more about the technique that you used to gather the information on these participants?
Certainly, I looked at National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey between the years 1999 and 2010, and the follow-up was through December 31, 2019. So the endpoint here was Alzheimer's disease-related deaths. And the initial variable was ethnicity, and then how diabetes modifies the effect.
What were the findings of this study?
Great question. So here, some of the findings were that Alzheimer's disease in African Americans is higher than in white Americans. Not only that, diabetes, that actually increased the impact of ethnicity on Alzheimer's disease-related deaths. So the combination of diabetes and ethnicity were higher than just ethnicity alone when you consider that as a variable.
Can you elaborate more on the racial disparities in Alzheimer's disease?
Certainly. So among Black Americans age 70 and older, 21.3% are living with Alzheimer's. Black Americans are twice as likely as older white Americans to have Alzheimer's disease. Only 20% of Black Americans say they have no barriers to optimal healthcare and support for Alzheimer's disease. And 55% of Black Americans think that significant loss of cognitive abilities or memory is a natural part of aging. Therefore, they would not go to a healthcare professional if they believe that memory loss is normal.
Can you tell us more about the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease?
Certainly. I'll go over the pathophysiology and then also the disparities that are present between African Americans and white Americans. So growing recognition is that Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's disease-related deaths pose a significantly higher burden on caregivers, Alzheimer's disease caregivers. There is a historical legacy of racial inferiority and systemic racism that has had a disastrous impact on how African Americans receive healthcare and interact with healthcare staff, particularly with the COVID-19 pandemic here. In addition, apolipoprotein E is a pathophysiologic indication of Alzheimer's disease. And as it turns out, African Americans actually have more apolipoprotein E than other races.
What other conclusions can you draw from this study?
So some of the conclusions include ethnicity has an important role in Alzheimer's disease-related mortality. More importantly, African American individuals with diabetes is 84% higher likelihood associated with ADRD mortality than Caucasians with the same disease. And then preventative measures must incorporate ethnicity as a consideration. Additionally, in the context of the pathophysiological disparities, these are a determinant of Alzheimer's disease risk in white Americans. However, in apolipoprotein E is actually found more in African Americans than Caucasians.
And what would you say are the overall take-home messages from this study and from our conversation today?
Well, the most important is that Black Americans are impacted by Alzheimer's disease. And if you go into some of the clinical trials and look at the commercials that you see, mostly you will see Alzheimer's disease related to white Americans. However, greater awareness needs to be there in order to determine the direct impact of not only Alzheimer's disease, also how chronic diseases play a role in enhancing the effect between ethnicity and overall mortality. Another area that needs more exploration is Black older adults. Since they would not go to healthcare professional for memory problems, more awareness needs to be included in certain ethnic groups.
Dr. Banerjee, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you.
For more research on Alzheimer's disease, visit consultant360.com.